Welcome back, everybody. It's my great pleasure to welcome my dear friend Juan Bastos, who is an amazing artist. It's a real privilege for us to have him in this class. And I've been telling him about you guys, and I've been speaking very highly of you. So I think that he's going to do something very special. I don't think you've done anything quite like this before online. So hopefully we won't have too many technical difficulties. But before we start, I want you guys to unmute your microphone. And let's give him a big hand. Thank you. So can you see everybody, Juan? Can you see everybody?
I saw two wonderful looking students, very happy and ready to learn, but I only saw two.
Okay, everybody's there. It's 14
Okay.
of them.
Anyway,
So now hold on a second. Can you guys see what he has prepared for you? Can you see it? Do you have it filling most of your screen? Okay, he's gonna get the camera a little bit closer, but before, please let me, let's hear what Juan has to say. I told him to do a little introduction to you guys before we start, okay? Thank you.
okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm Juan Bastos. Jose and I met at the Maryland Institute College of Art in a portraiture class, and we graduated around the same time. And then I did a master's at Towson University. Since I graduated, I've been making a living as an artist. And thanks partly because of my ambition to become a portrait painter that I have become. Portraiture has been a great source for me of, an income, and at the same time, something I'm very passionate about. I also had exhibitions of my other work, but I'm going to talk today about my technique of pastels. My curiosity about pastel started in La Paz, Bolivia. I'm from Bolivia. I was born in Venezuela, but we moved there with my family when I was 11 years old. I have a Bolivian family. And I was lucky to have my father's sister as a teacher. So I would go and sneak out in her studio when I was 11, 12, and so on, and see what she was doing. And many of the portraits that she was doing was with pastels. So when I was maybe 14, she gave me some classes, and she taught me how to work with pastels. So that was the beginning of everything. So once I think that drawing is the basics for everything. If you know how to draw, you can get away with murder. So I was taking painting lessons and so on, but then I thought, I'm going to just stop and work with pastels or with charcoal or with pencil, but I'm not going to paint yet. So that was very important. So once I arrived in the United States, I went to the Maryland Institute College of Art, and they had a great program of drawing. That's why I chose the Maryland Institute, because amongst all the art schools that I was doing research, they really had a great drawing department. Anyway, I started working with pastels, and I recall that I used to do like studies, and I will do this portrait, for example, but I kept them as studies. And Jose actually said, what about if you just finish them? You do them so well that what about if you just do them as finished pieces? And that was a very important tip. And so I started completing the pastels. For example, this is a complete enormous pastel that I did for my clients in Bangkok, Thailand. So this is 52 inches wide. So that's pretty big. So in order to do a pastel this big, you have to buy a roll of sanded pastel paper. So let me go to papers. I was using Fabriano Roma, which is a very nice, wonderful name, beautiful pastel paper that I could buy at the store at the Maryland Institute, and it had a nice tooth. However, the problem about usually normal pastel papers that you cannot rework an area. After you keep working with the chalk for a number of times, the tooth of the pastel starts receding, and then it doesn't grab the new information that you're trying to add. That's the problem about the regular papers. When I was visiting La Paz, Bolivia in 1992 or so, I met a wonderful Bolivian artist who said, hey, let's exchange works. I do your portrait and you do my portrait. So I was very honored because he was very talented and very well known. And he came to my home, my parents' home, and he brought a sheet of sanded pastel paper. And he said, Juan, I don't work with pastels. However, I know you do. So I brought this paper that perhaps you can do my portrait on it. And I said, terrific, let's try it. So that was the sanded pastel paper.
Let me
That,
interrupt it. Let me
yeah,
interrupt here right now. Guys, in the chat, I'm going to put what he's talking about because it's really key. Okay, do you see it in the chat? Sanded pastel paper. Now, do they sell it by the sheet or do they sell it in a roll?
they sell it as small sheets, medium sheets, or rolls.
And do you buy it online or do you buy it in an art store?
Both. I go to Blick Art Store, and what is great is that you can see here that I have a sandy tone, and then this is a darker tone. Usually when you buy them in rolls, it's kind of a creamy tone, but just recently today, I sent you a link and they sell them with a bit of a darker tan, which is terrific. So I would recommend, if you're going to buy a large one, that it should have some type of underpaint, because it is a little bit harder to work with pastels on a white paper. It's much better to do it with some kind of tone, and depending what you are drawing. So anyway, it's very dark, once again, to get the darks right with pastels. For example, this is the typical nice box of pastels that I receive as a present. They're all very a nice selection and so on. However, very few dark tones. The darkest tones have 100% pigment, and they are harder to find. However, you know, I love Sennelier, which is a good brand, and they sell a box of just dark tones of pastels. They also sell them separately. So then if you don't have to buy an entire box, you can go online and I send you the information. So this is some of the tones that I have of the darker pastels. Many times people tell me, your pastels look like oil paintings. And because, you know, many people think about pastels with pretty colors like Renoir and, you know, light blues and light pinks and airy, but I always try my pastels to have some contrast and some oomph. I was a guest at high school a couple of years ago, and I did an art demonstration in an hour of a student. And so this is like a quick study. So the important tip about working with pastels is from general to specific. You don't get hung up in a detail. You keep working on the blocks of lights and tones. And most importantly, squint. Jose and I were taught by Peter Collier and our teacher at the Maryland Institute about squinting. And for me, that was how to see color, how to see the lights and the darks. I remember the model came for the first time. It was a portraiture class, and she was wearing beautiful violet and pink shirt, and everybody was excited because, you know, you wanted to paint her with that blouse. And the teacher said, okay, change. And then she put a white shirt against a white background. And everybody was disappointed because that was boring. And the teacher said, no, 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 there are many tones in white. And you're going to be squinting, and you know, to do something so colorful can be a little distracting and a little bit harder on this first assignment. And he was right. Anyway, last thing to share, I got a portrait commission now with the situation about the virus. My portrait work has been limited. So now I'm doing a posthumous portrait of my client's mother from New Mexico. So I have the photograph in black and white with her artwork of the New Mexico. And then I had to do a pastel based on that photograph. And I had to find a sweater online that looked like the 1940s. So you do a little bit of research, and there was no photograph of her against her work. So then I knew the drawing that she did. So I pasted the photograph and I created a composition. So you have to be creative and resourceful to create a subject. Anyway, I think that we are basically, if somebody has any questions, that would be great. And otherwise, oh, the pluses and minuses about pastels. The wonderful thing about pastels is they remain the same as long as they are taken care of. I went to France to a chateau to do a portrait of the Baroness de Lassus a few years ago, and her son, you know, it was a beautiful palace, basically a castle. And one of the pastels of the ancestors from maybe 1820 had water damage. And he said, Juan, look what happened. I don't know what to do. And then I opened it. And the area that was damaged, I thought, well, I have my pastels, maybe I can touch them up. But the minute that I touched the pastel, I had the pastel transfer into my fingertips. So the blues of the outfit, I tucked them and then I moved them to the area that was damaged. And after over 100 years, the pastel was still fresh, and I was able to tap the areas. So I didn't use my pastels. I used the pastel that was in the drawing to actually transfer the information to the damaged areas. And in a few minutes, I was able to fix the problem. So that was a very interesting experience. So the minus is that it's fragile. So you have to be very careful. You have to have a piece of glass protecting them, or, you know, somewhere. And that's about it. If you have any questions, please let me know. In the meantime, I'm going to start working on a still life that I have created there. In order to make it more interesting, I put the background with textiles, and I drew, you know, in 15 minutes, more or less, the drawing yesterday. So then it will be a little bit faster doing the demonstration while I'm explaining. I have selected some of my pastels and I put them against some white. So I have the greens, the yellows, the oranges, and the whites. So they get dirty pretty quickly. So then you always need a rag to clean the pastels while you are working, because they get dirty. So then you can transfer the dirty chalk into the drawing easily. So that's why you have to maintain them clean. There was this law about not using black in pastels. There was this old-fashioned way, and that's why maybe the Impressionists and so on had these very airy pastels, except Degas. Degas had unbelievable pastels with blacks and so on. But, you know, people were cautious about black, because the minute that you use black, you can muddy the entire pastels very easily. So if you're going to use black, be very careful for certain accents and so on, and clean your fingers every time that you're using your pastels, because you can transfer easily. I often end up washing my hands every 10 minutes in order to keep rubbing them. Okay, time to go.
Thank
Okay,
you,
here.
Juan. And guys, I'm going to ask you to please save your questions until the end. And remember that I can see if you're looking at the screen or you're doing something else. So since I'm not doing the demo, I can watch you paying attention or not. Okay?
Okay, here we
Very good.
are. Oh, by the way, wear a mask. I mean, I'm going to try to do this. If you cannot hear me, let me know. Because pastels are very toxic. So be careful because you are breathing all the powder. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. So
Can you?
from general to specific. Remember that. And also, it's easier to work in an area that is darker and then bring the highlights back. So don't work from light to dark, work from dark to light. Okay, so right now, this is some kind of gray. And I'm going to just this is a Rembrandt brand. I'm combining Rembrandt with Sennelier. You know, very quickly. Just get a sense of the underpaint helps enormously. So you're not working against a white background. Many times I just don't fix my pastels. These are the shadows of the lemons and the shadows Jose, can you see well the
I can see it very well. Can you guys see it? Do the thumbs up if you can see it. Is it close enough? You have a full screen, I hope. Good.
so as you can see, I am trying to get a sense of the color of the entire piece. Right now. So you're not spending a lot of time in one area. You squint, and once you have your drawing more or less there, you break the pastels, because usually, you know, the pastels come this way, but then what you do is that you break them, and then with the chalk, you can grade the edge for details. So right now I'm doing the shadows, so I'm going to use a darker green that I will mix later. The green is a little strong, so I'm going to kill it with a little brownish. So once I'm going to just do some of this. There is a reflection of the yellow on the silver jar. And Okay. A little blue too. So once you are in a certain, when you have created some of this, then you can use your fingers to blend. And then you create a more solid effect with the pastels. And it's important to actually blend the background with the object. And there is the sfumato that Leonardo da Vinci had created for objects to be incorporated with the background and not cut out. I have decided that the composition is going to go more or less from here to here. Okay. I have a nice green here. I haven't ever used it, so I'm going to actually cut it. Oops, look what happened, all powdery. So that's the problem about some pastels, that they break. But they're still workable. Sometimes when you have this powder, you can save it and then smash it and then cover areas. So it's not completely gone. I mean, some of these little chunks are at $6, $5. So if you just break them and they are smashed, it's too bad, but you can still use them.
Those are very pretty colors that you chose for the still life.
Yeah, it's important. If you're having a still life, I recommend the work of Julio Larraz, who is a wonderful artist, very imaginative, and he does great still lifes, very imaginative.
Okay, students, if you haven't noticed, I'm putting notes on the chat so you can get the names and the technical words.
There are pencils for pastels, but I really don't use them that often. For if you're going to work on something that is smaller and maybe more drawn with lines, then the color pastel pencils are pretty good. But I particularly enjoy working more with the sticks.
Juan, let me ask you a question while you're working.
Yeah.
There are some illustrators that mix pastels with other mediums like gouache. Have you ever mixed pastels, or do you always work in purely pastels?
I'm very much of a purist, so I don't work using. Oh, you know what I have done? I have done my mixed media with pastels. So I'll be right back.
Oh, you don't have to show it now. Don't worry. We can look at it later. Don't worry.
Okay. I have. What happened is that I saw an exhibition of Degas pastels in New York City years ago, And what he did was to use his lithographs, black and white, to incorporate pastels depending of the daytime. So what he did was imagine you have the same image, five identical lithographs. So he went at different times of the day, and on top of a black and white image, he just worked on pastels during daytime, rainy day, evening. So he created an entire, based on the same subject, theme of different studies of the subject. So then I thought maybe one could actually do a black and white Xerox copy of an image of resume paper and work with pastels on top. So I created that concept, which was very, very favorable. So
So you would use your own photographs.
can you bring me some experiments from the kitchen? Sure. So right now I'm getting some black. Okay, I'm going to use the black to create certain accents. Okay, going back with pastels, I took pictures of this model, and then this is it was based on a photograph and then with pastels, I was able to create these textures on top of the surface of the figure. So there is a photographic quality about it, but then there is the porosity of the pastels. In this one, the figure was somebody on the floor, and I took it from a ladder, but then you don't see the figure much. It's all pastels on top of the figure. So you create an abstract quality that is very painterly. I use a little kind of acrylic, so then you can see the tones of the brush over there, the effects of the brush, but then everything else is with pastels.
So thank you for showing that. So that's something that you may consider, doing a drawing first, and then printing it digitally, totally, or even doing a collage with some of your photos and digital. And then if you print it on paper, the pastel would stick to it very nicely. So that's definitely something to keep in mind.
So the black is important in order to give some depth to the composition. I'm not doing the highlights of the silver yet. remember, from dark to light. And it's kind of hard with pastels because the chalks are usually into the light direction. So
It's looking great already.
thank you. You know, it's still there's the information that I can go back to the design, but it's a little tricky to be.
Do you ever use a blender stick?
No, my fingers. Some people find it very useful, and so because I just did that lemon, I'm cleaning my hands. I'm doing this.
So Juan,
Yeah.
if you don't mind, we're almost not quite halfway, but close to that. Do you guys have a question that you'd like to ask now before he goes into the second part of this? Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask?
I have a quick one.
Tell me. Your name?
Are you using chalk pastels?
Yes, it's soft pastels. Not oil, it's soft pastels.
So this is Victoria. Please introduce yourselves to Juan because he cannot see half of you because we have it on the thing.
Hi, Victoria.
Oh, hi. My name is Victoria.
Hi, Victoria.
So have you worked with soft pastels before, Victoria?
Not often. No, not recently.
Well, you know, let me tell you, the luminosity that you get with pastels, once you finish, I have done portraits of several people, and whenever I do an oil portrait, usually they need some extra light, especially in the evening when you see the portrait. With pastels, it's magical. Even in the evening, the portrait almost glows. So there's a certain luminosity that the pastel has, and people ask me, why do you like pastels so much? They have a bit of a life of their own. You know, once they are finished, or even as a study, you can see them in a room that is a little dark, and they are very much alive. While an oil painting usually needs a little bit of a spotlight. The pastel, you can almost get away with just like that. So that's one of the reasons why I love pastels, that they have a certain brilliance, a certain life of their own, which is quite remarkable.
Thank you,
That's
Juan.
so cool.
Sure. Okay.
Do you guys have any other questions before he continues?
TikTok.
Okay. You can think about it for later. Okay.
As I'm also, the positioning of the easel with the pastel, with whatever you're working, is very important. Sometimes there are art students who have the easel here, and then they have to go like this, and they go back and work, and they go back like this, and they go back and work. So you're making life very difficult. So position your easel very close to whatever you're going to paint, because then your eyes move, but not your head and not your body. So make it easy for you when you're working on something.
Thank you, Juan.
You're welcome.
I'm going to step out for a moment. I'll be right back.
So anyway, I'm going to do some highlights here. For the time being. And I'm going to try to have the silver sometimes, like Paul Cézanne, the artist, the French impressionist, will create a landscape or a still life with bold strokes. And I have always enjoyed seeing his still lifes and landscapes, particularly because he was not a cubist, but thanks to Paul Cézanne, I think cubism emerged as well. He would actually block sections of a landscape or a still life with strokes of either pastels or oils in kind of very bold manners. So this is what I'm doing right now. Don't go into details, but just do the structure of whatever you're doing. Like this. And then you can use your finger to blend it a little bit in some sections. Remember, you're using black, so you have to clean your hands after that. So slowly you start getting some three-dimensionality with he creates sometimes a section and the texture of the paper comes through. So sometimes it's pretty to just leave it alone and don't do everything with your finger. So you jump from one section to another, using sometimes the same pastel. And remember to squint. I'm going to use one of this to emphasize again. It's a little kind of fleshy tone. I don't want the image of the that I had drawn to completely disappear. So with this, I'm bringing it back. And you don't have to be super detailed, you know, just here's some butterfly symbol. So if the green takes over, be careful not to completely erase whatever you have done. This section here is going to be a little darker, but we'll take care of that later. What is interesting about this concept, if you think about it, it's not just a still life that is by accident. I chose a background that has an organic shape of branches with little flowers and butterflies. And if you think about it, I have chosen lemons. So you have a real lemons on still life, but there is a little bit of a game with the background, which is a decorative concept of nature. So if you think about it, you have lemons coming from trees, but at the same time, you have all these branches. So there is a kind of a fun dialogue between the real lemons and the decorative background. At the Getty Museum some years ago, there was an exhibition of a woman artist whose name I don't remember. I think that she was German. And in Germany in the 1800s, women could not paint with oils. They could paint with watercolors, but they were just very strict about this rule. And there was this famous woman who started doing botanical gardens. And she went to South America and she went to the Guyanas and so on. And she did these beautiful renditions of flowers and all of that with watercolors. And she was actually the first person who presented her art in this kind of botanical book. What was interesting is that she will depict a plant from the minute that the flower was emerging to in the same plant, the other flower was dying. So there was a story behind something that looked just like an illustration. But if you think about it, there was a lot of thought when she was depicting the story of that plant and flower. Anyway. Doing the highlight of the lemon. Now that I have added more information about the branches, I'm being a little bit more daring with the greens. How are we doing with the time, Jose?
Officially, we have 10 more minutes, but we can take a little longer if you want.
Okay. Remember, this part is lighter than this part. So I'm bringing And it's always good to exaggerate a touch, tones, and values in order for the art to be a little richer. If you think about the portraits of Frans Hals, he will accentuate those noses and make them maybe pinkier, or the cheeks a little more red. So when you exaggerate a little touch, sections of whatever you decide to paint, they become a little richer. So it's always good to push a little bit more the tones to create a more exciting piece of art. I'm adding a little bluish. A little kind of more neutral tone to blend it. Okay, these are the butterflies. There's a section here, orange. It's always kind of fun to actually do and see the work upside down. And then you immediately see the areas that need more work. I immediately see that the tablecloth and this section is a little weak. Okay. It's great to have lilacs and purples around for that later you can blend with the grays. So at the beginning you can do that, but then blend it right away. Remember, purple and green is a wonderful combination. I'm not telling you to do the tablecloth in purple, but if you have little hints of purple in the shadows, that's a very nice direction. Keep blending it. Shadows are always cool. Remember that. You cannot have a warm shadow. So what is great about the Sander pastel paper that it really grabs the pastel. I don't know if you saw some of my work that I had to incorporate a dog in a portrait of this young woman. With regular paper, I would have not been able to actually take the hand completely and add the dog into the pastel because the paper wouldn't have been able to hold. I can work and rework on the pastel paper. And as you can see, I haven't fixed it. With the fixative, at this stage, I could fix it so everything is grabbed and there, and I can keep working. But you should never fix a pastel at the end, because then you will kill all the beautiful tones. So as long as you take care of it and don't and take care of your pastel, it's all good. Keep going back with this. Any questions?
Kelly?
Hey, this is Kelly.
Hi, Kelly.
I know that since the paper has sand in it, when you blend with your fingers, does it eventually start hurting or anything?
No, you know, I was just thinking about that. It's very funny. I was just thinking about that it doesn't hurt. With regular sandpaper, yes, I can see that problem, but not with this. Otherwise, my fingers would be, you know, messy. But no, it's a very nice tooth that doesn't hurt.
Okay.
But yeah. So it's very manageable.
Is the paper very expensive?
Well, you know, a sheet like this is maybe $12, but you can
Okay.
buy smaller ones for less in a block. But I think that this is a very good size, and you can cut it in half. But it's worth it. It's worth all the money. Let me tell you. So you know, in today's times, $11 for a sheet of paper is not that bad.
No. Have you tried scanning them? The drawings?
Scanning? No, I take photographs always of my work, and then I you know, put them in the computer, and eventually I just no, I don't scan them. You know, they're just huge. So so right now it has that kind of post-impressionist look because it's very loose, and I'll keep working on it. I'll send Jose the finished piece, so then you can all see what it looks like in the future. But
in the piece in which, sorry, this is Nakai. In the piece that you added the dog, how did you deal with like having too many layers of pastel or like the weight change there?
what I did in the area that I was going to completely, I love your cat, that I was going to change, I fixed the area where the original arm was because I was going to paint over. So then fixing it, then it avoided the mixing of colors. So, and then I had to move the arm. Did you see the portrait? I think Jose shared my work. Anyway, so you saw the before and after. But as you can see, there is no trace that a hand was on her knee anymore. So that was very, very important. So yeah, and you know, you can keep working on that. You know, it's really unbelievable because pastels were always so fragile that it was very hard to work with otherwise on the regular paper. I'm trying to find.
Now you draw and paint very fast. Do you find that working in pastels is faster for you than doing the equivalent in an oil painting?
You know, it all depends about the technique that you want to do. If you want a loose technique to just boom, 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 do something, I wonder sometimes, you know, because I can start an oil painting and pretty much in an hour have something very much developed. Pastels are not easy. I mean, at the same time, once you know the tricks, then of course it's much easier. But it is it's messy. You know, my hands are all green. I have to keep washing them. But it's a beautiful media that once you experience it, it's great to go back and rediscover things. I don't know. It's I try my oils to look like my pastels. and my pastels look like my oils.
Mm.
Because sometimes with my oils, I can be a little rough, and I cannot get the subtleties that I get in my pastels. So then I try to approach my oils the way that I tried my pastels, and vice versa. So then my pastels have more meat than the regular pastels. And my oils have become a little bit more just sensitive in some areas. Anyway, it's an interesting process.
So I have one more question for you, and then we're going to be wrapping this up.
Okay.
Is there any books on technique that you recommend for the students? Or are you pretty much self-taught?
Yes, very much so. I think that there was not a class at the Federal Institute about pastels. There was zero. And even when I went, no, I never took a class of pastels. And my relative in Bolivia, she did the pastels very softly, very old-fashioned, a little naive. So she didn't go into, okay, do the pastels with, with the strength. So she was a little timid working with pastels. So it's my own approach and my own, studying, of course, Lyotard, and you have a collection of books. Now your generation, you have the internet, which you have access to all these artists. But Jose and I are from the generation of collecting art books, and I did collect some wonderful books of pastels and Degas and so on. So study the masters, go to the museums, and once the museums are open, just see them in real life. Because one thing is to see the art in an image in the computer or in your telephone. Another thing is to see the scale of a piece of art, and just go close and examine how they did the technique. So most of my pastel knowledge comes from studying great masters in pastels and having visited museums and so on. So
so I think that there is a window of opportunity there for you to write a book on how to paint in pastels, because I would totally buy it.
Thank you. Well, nowadays on YouTube, you can actually type pastels, these techniques, and there are people working. I haven't really checked, but I'm sure that there are plenty of methods. Even in Instagram, I don't remember the man, but he does landscapes. They're very small in pastels, and they truly look like oil paintings. And I was trying to find it, and I couldn't find it for this class. But very talented person, and very dramatic with the darks and the lights. Anyway, I think for my own sensibility, I like to actually show a few strokes here and there. I don't like my pastels to look like photographs. And sometimes when you look at a piece of work in a telephone, oh my God, it looks like a photograph. Yeah, it's a huge pastel, and then you see it this big. So of course it looks like a photograph. But then if you see the real piece of work, then you see textures and strokes that you cannot appreciate in a little image. So that's why it's important to just go out and sometimes museums have an entire section of pastels. The Getty Museum here in Los Angeles has a room that you don't have natural light. It's all artificial light because they are delicate, and then that room always has pastels, and the Metropolitan has pastels. So I think it's important for you go and see the real stuff.
Thank you. Now, do we have one last question from you guys? No? Okay.
I'll show you briefly a pastel here in my studio. Let me just change this. Okay. So there is a pastel here, and I created. The paper was cream, but then I used the grays and I spray it. So I created this explosive presentation in a way with the background. And then I did a very realistic face. So that was a way of doing a pastel. And this one is a large one. And she posed, and but I left certain sections unfinished. Like, for example, the chair, it was all very crisp and detailed, but then it went away, disappearing. So then it's almost like a study. And of course, this is an oil painting, which is a little bit of a different. And then last, this is a pastel also.
Great.
And they are, this is museum glass, so it doesn't have reflection, which is great. But anyway, so the studio is more pastels, all messy, natural light, northern light, which is great. And something that is for you to think about, I keep postcards of the works that I like. So then you have, Holbein and all the great artists, combined with illustrations as a way to always get inspiration, and that's the last pastel. Okay, so.
Well, thank you so much, Juan. It's been a pleasure letting us in your studio and doing this amazing demo. I know I enjoyed it. If my students enjoyed it, even a part of how much I enjoyed it, they enjoyed it a lot. So everybody, I want you to unmute your cameras for a moment. And let's give Juan a big thank you, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Nice to meet you.
Thank you, Juan. And I will
You're
send you the recording. If the students have any follow-up questions, do you mind if they forward them to you?
No, of course. I will be delighted. Okay.
Very good. Thank you so much, Juan. This was terrific.
Bye-bye. You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye.